Hey, my friend. Tonight we step into Egypt's desert where the moonlight trembles like it's about to be swallowed whole. You wouldn't survive this night. Trust me. Not if you were a Nile farmer 3,000 years ago and the sky blackened at noon. Picture it. The deep blue heavens turn to ink, birds fall silent, and the earth shudders like it's cursed. Ancient Egyptians believed the serpent Apep was devouring Ra's Sunand. Only oil lamps burning through the night could fend off the jaws of darkness. Before you close your eyes, hit like, subscribe, and let me know where you're listening from. Then switch off the light, turn on the fan for its soothing hum. Together, we'll travel through 16 boringly sleep-inducing tales of eclipse fear and the art of guarding light, the craft that had Egyptians burning oil for 2 hours straight, just hoping the sky would brighten again. The night before the eclipse, the Sahara wind, laced with the scent of resin and animal fat, slipped through the mud brick window, grazing the nape like a cool, teasing hand. In the cramped workshop, the unfinished statue of a god stood. Ipu, the taciturn sculptor, set down his chisel and brushed off stone dust. He should have been sleeping, but instead, he quietly lifted the clay oil lamp, his only weapon against the hunger of the serpent demon, Apep. The small lamp, funnel-shaped and red as earth, looked like a mere souvenir. Yet tonight, it bore the weight of saving the entire household. Ipu threaded the twisted linen wick into the lamp's mouth, poured castor oil, and nodded as if measuring liquor like a bartender. His great-grandmother's words echoed. Whenever the sun goes dark, Apep slithers across the sky like an eel. Anyone who lets their house go dark aids its cause. Ipu was 7 then. Now, with salt and pepper hair, his heart still twinged at the memory of the sky blackening at noon. Mert, his wife, mended clothes by the hearth, glancing at the lamp as if it were a pass through the night. She teased, "If Apep swallows the sun, make sure to demand it spit out an extra jar of oil." They chuckled softly, careful not to wake Pippi, their 7-year-old son, who clutched a wooden Anubis toy beside a wicker basket. In his sleep, Pippi whispered, "Ra," piercing Ipu's heart. He stroked his son's hair, silently wondering, could this tiny halo of flame reach the zenith of the heavens? The fire flared greenish blue, then settled into a steady gold. The warm scent of oil mingled with dry wood and resin, crafting an ancient, scented candle. Shadows of statues stretched sinuously on the walsum like snakes, others like spoons stirring honey. Ipu swallowed, reassuring himself it was just an illusion. To pass the time, he tapped the chisel's handle on the table, softly singing a Nile lullaby. Ra will return, bringing dawn. The rhythm was slow, like a ceiling fan. Mert joined in with the sound of her needle stitching. Pippi's wheezy breaths added to the mix. Unwittingly, the three became an orchestra against fear. The wind shifted, sand scraping the palm leaf roof, dogs barking, then falling silent. The builder's village flickered with dots of lamplight, each household kindling its own fire, chanting private mantras. But Ipu's home relied solely on the clay lampa backup battery for faith. Ipu noted the remaining oil. Enough for 2 nights. Tomorrow, I'll carve a relief advertising. Ipu's lamp burns away fear, he joked. Mert snorted, tension dissolving like beer foam. The flame pulsed steadily, like a sleeping cat's heartbeat. Ipu's eyelids grew heavy, but each time they drooped, an image of Apep's gaping maw flashed. He opened the window, letting in the cool, barley-scented air. Above, the sky brimmed with stars. The dark shadow hadn't yet appeared, but in human hearts, fear had already set sail. Ipu leaned against a wooden post, gazing at the tiny speck of light. Perhaps this flame can't touch the heaven's peak, he whispered, but it only needs to reach my heart. The thought warmed like a blanket. The lamp crackled, the wind hummed softly, and Pippi murmured in his dream sounds as ancient and soothing as a podcast. Before sitting, Ipu performed his final test. He raised the lamp to eye level, checking if the flame illuminated the full rim of his irises. If that speck of light still touched the depths of his pupils, he believed Ra would see it too. He adjusted the wick. The fire purred, casting a golden halo on the mottled wall, turning it into a hazy screen. On it, Ipu pictured the eclipse's shadow slicing across the Nile like a charcoal stroke. A memory surged. During the last eclipse, he was still an apprentice, staying up all night to guard a statue from thieves. When the sun vanished, the valley turned frigid, insects fell silent. Back then, Ipu vowed, if he ever had a family, he'd always keep an oil lamp ready, lest his loved ones drown in panic. Now, he kept that promise. The steady flame bathed the statue in a honeyed glow, transforming the workshop into a cocoon of warm light. Ipu breathed deeply, quietly thanking the humble technology that turned fear into routine. Light the lamp, adjust the wick, tap a rhythm, await dawn. If dawn tarried, he'd sing until the sun remembered its path. Apep, or Apophis, isn't some cool villain straight out of modern cartoons. To the people of the Nile, it was a living black hole coiled around the cosmic twin rivers, ever poised to snap at the lone skiff carrying the god Ra. During each eclipse, as darkness smothered the sky's disk, priests urged the people to light lamps and shout at the top of their lungs. Silence meant the serpent would swallow the sun whole and spit out eternal night. Not exactly romantic compared to the glittering sphinx on postcards, is it? From Ipu's sculpture workshop, the beat of semimp drums rolled in like a giant heartbeat. Sand dust pattered down onto the mud roof, signaling the dark performance was about to begin. Ipu placed the clay oil lamp in the courtyard. Its trembling golden flame illuminated the calloused hands of a man who'd spent 40 years chiseling stone and 40 years ensuring his home never went dark during an eclipse. Out in the streets, young herdsmen let out long whoops. Youths with gold-painted eyelids danced wildly, not unlike a prehistoric Coachella. They believed their noise wove ropes to bind the sky serpent's jaws. Bakers banged dough molds to the chant, Ra, 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 3 ancient syllables that sound like the like, share, sub of our era. In the garden, Pippi brandished a reed stalk as a sword, yelling, I'm Horace Jr. Mert handed him a barley cake, warning him to chew slowly lest he anger the cosmic snake. The blend of play and ritual kept the family's pulse at a soothing tempo, a wholly organic form of ASMR. The light turned metallic, golden sunlight morphing into leaden gray. Ipu twisted the wick, boosting the flame by half a finger's breadth. The scent of castor oil rose, mingling with resin, forming a scented candle for calm. He sprinkled ash around the lamp's rim to keep the flame from licking the pottery, his motions as practiced as a barista crafting latte art. At Karnak Temple, the high priest Nekbet ordered 30 bronze mirrors arranged in a fan, reflecting the last rays onto the cloudza, Morse code of antiquity sent straight to Ra. Modern tourists would call it a laser show, but to the people of Thebes, it was a fragile bridge of hope. Ipu recalled his first time at the temple. The ceremony was dazzling, but behind it were blistered bare feet from polishing mirrors. History up close is always stained with sweat. He glanced at his oil-smeared hands, thinking, cracked palms are their own chronicle. The shadow advanced. A disoriented stork landed by the canal, collapsing at Ipu's feet. Pippi moved to run toward it, but his father stopped him. When the sun returns, it'll fly. The words comforted Ipu too. Light would return, and every crack would mend. The chanters on the east bank grew hoarse, their cries fracturing. Neckbet unleashed his final move, a cowhide drum as big as a chariot wheel. The first beat shook the ground, the second jolted Ipu's chest. In California, 2025, people pay for vibration therapy. In Thebes, 1320 BCE, it was free and mandatory. The sun dwindled to a thin ring of light, the wind stilled, and everything sank to a whisper. Ipu heard the faint crackle of oil in the wick, like popcorn just beginning to pop. In that eerie silence, he briefly wondered, if Ra didn't return, what was Plan B? But the familiar script played out. A blinding ring flared, diamond fireworks bursting forth. Cheers drowned out drums and gongs. Pippi spun his reed, shouting, "Burn, you bad snake!" The stork flapped its wings, soaring into a honey-tinted sky. The village felt like it had just hit the jackpot on the stock market of faith. Neckbet bowed, knowing the credit belonged to countless humble flames. One oil lamp, one linen wick, one off-key song, one child's cry. It was an ancient Wi-Fi network, linking hearts to Ra's glowing router. Ipu blew gently on the wick, letting the flame fade to smoldering Embersa receipt, proving his family had paid their dawn fee in full. He pressed the cooled lamp into Pippi's hands. "If one day I'm not home, you know what to do." The boy clutched the treasure, as if holding the key to tomorrow's light. Out in the streets, oil merchants instantly hiked prices. Mert shook her head. "That snake's big, but human greed is bigger." Ipu laughed. "As long as they light up on time, Ra won't mind." They cleared away the cakes, hearts light. They'd just survived a 2-hour-long night. Before closing your eyes, consider this. Every deadline, every urgent red-flagged email is just a smaller version of that dark shadow. You can shout by scheduling tasks, light a lamp with a cup of coffee, and sprinkle some humor on life's surface, like ash around Ipu's lamp. When light returns, the word sent glimmers like the corona of an eclipse bursting open. That's enough to remind you that you like Ra will keep sailing into tomorrow. So there you go, my friend. If your bedside lamp is an energy-saving LED, silently thank Ipu Neckbet and the chanters by the Nile. Because of them, we know that sometimes a speck of light no bigger than a fingernail can stare down a cosmic black hole. Now, pull up the blanket, turn on the fan, swap the cement drum for its soothing hum, and sleep well. If APEP swings by New Jersey, just clap 3 times or replay this video. The sun always returns, and so does sleep. What about you? Where in the world are you watching this video from? Drop a comment below. We love the feeling of connecting with our global audience. If this story made you pause and reflect, help us out with a subscribe and share it with a friend who you think needs to hear it too. From Memphis to Thebes, the shadow creeping over the sky's edge stirred a national orchestra. Gongs, iron shields, and cement drums thundered in turn. The waves of sound raced along the Nile's banks like a frantic tweet storm, each watch post a retweeting account, urgently signaling the cosmos that APEP better abandon its plan to steal the sun. The clash of metal was ear-piercing by the silent desert night standards, yet deep enough to lull modern weary travelers into an ASMR state. If they closed their eyes and imagined lying on a reed mat, with a ceiling fan of hot desert wind blowing through mud wall crevices. In Karnak's great hall, the guardian hairy mattel, and lean, with a forked beard, and eyes lined with charcoal stooped to lift a censer steeped in pine resin, pungent with the scent of burning honey. He circled a lotus column, each turn sprinkling more resin grains, sparking tiny firework-like flecks that fizzled into wisps of smoke. Every step was measured to avoid the black tile linea symbolic boundary of Apep's jaws. Harry Ma muttered incantations, his deep, warm voice stretching long, like an ancient radio broadcasting Ra FM at midnight. Outside the corridor, a line of soldiers formed ranks, shields pressed into the sand to create a resonant stage for the semimp drums. Each time the drummer struck the cowhide, the row of shields amplified the sound, booming, thud-clang, like artificial thunder. The bronze mirror polishers' youths, gleaming with scented oil, angled their reflective discs to catch the last rays, sweeping them back and forth across the temple walls, like SOS flashlight signals for Ra. One beam struck a pharaoh's statue face, casting a dancing halo onto the courtyard. Young herdsmen mistook it for the god's eyes opening wide, clanging their gongs louder and tracing protective circles in the sand. Ipu, the sculptor from Thebes' outskirts, still cradled his son Pippi beside the clay oil lamp. The distant drums echoed, blending with the crackle of the burning wick. Pippi tilted his head and asked, "Father, are they really fighting?" Ipu smiled, stroking his son's hair. "They're singing for Ra, letting him know we're still awake, waiting." The explanation was as soft as a linen pillow, making Pippi yawn, yet he kept his eyes wide, for at 7 he'd never seen the black shadow swallow the sky. In Memphis upstream, the young priest Kasa leaned against Ptah's shrine wall. He gripped a heavy rope, poised to pull the stone bell. As the shadow crossed its peak, the bell tolled a deep bong, reverberating from the ground to his knees. When the final note faded, Kasa whispered, "Ra, we're here," then stepped back, yielding the stage to the sound waves echoing from the south. Upper and Lower Egypt played in unisona low-bandwidth orchestra, with 100% coverage. The pine resin smoke in Karnak thickened. The lotus column blurred into a dark haze, making the hall feel smaller, as if only Harry Ma and Apep's jaws wrestled within a ring. He stopped at his starting point, the censer half empty, and drew a white ostrich feather with his other hand. Outside, the shield's rhythm surged. He flicked the feather like a conductor signaling a key change, then boldly chanted the final incantation. A dash of humor? He sneezed exactly like a pollen-allergic spectator, making the assistant priests stifle laughter. In that tense moment, the sneeze became an unintentional comic break, easing everyone's nerves. Moments later, the shadow reached its peak, light turned cold gray, the column bases stained tin. The semimp drums slowed, each beat spaced like a meditator's pulse at session's end. Soldiers lowered shields, people stopped chanting, even the wind ceased slipping through. In that instant, Karnak fell utterly silent, save for the tiny crackle of oil wicks in every household, including Ipu's modest workshop. Harry Ma stood in the darkened hall, eyes closed, feeling the stillness like a lake before a fish leaps. This was the universe's battery check moment. Would the tiny oil lamps in families' hands shine brightly enough to signal Ra? The response came as a faint tremor. No one knew if it was the drum's lingering echo or the sand contracting as temperatures dropped, but any slight vibration then meant, beyond the darkness, the sun god nods. Harry Ma opened his eyes, swept the ostrich feather through the censer's embers, blew in 4 directions, and raised the empty bowl. The gesture was as decisive as hitting send on a final message. Instantly, the soldiers swung their shields one last time. Young herdsmen struck gongs with all their might, and a second tweet storm of sound shot skyward. Ipu, too, twisted his lamp's wick, raising the flame half a finger higher. Pippi let out a soft cheer, spotting the faint silver halo like a wedding band around the sun's edge. Mert sniffed and whispered. Ra has growled softly. The silver halo flared into a blinding diamond streak, hitting a bronze mirror outside Karnak's hall, bouncing onto the sand, then spreading like a backlit painting. The mirror polisher's reflective network blazed to lice a chain of flashing specks, like a modern highway billboard scrolling LED text. Congratulations, the sun survives. The Simimp drums fell silent. Instead, a thunderous roar of cheers outdid the shield clangs. Harry Ma smiled faintly, gripping the lotus column to steady himself, feeling like a director leaving the control room after the film rolls to its happy ending. At Ipu's home, Mert hugged her husband and son. The lamp still burned, but now its only task was to guide the three to bed. By Memphis's levee, Kasa released the bell rope, bending to rewick his lamp for tomorrow night. He reminded himself, though Ra always returns, we still must wake him. Thus, each sorrow cycle is a rehearsal without a script. Maybe Apep's just slow to learn, or maybe Ra loves live music. Who knows? What's certain is that the cement drum sentient loudspeakers will keep sounding steadily, teaching every generation that fighting darkness sometimes just takes rhythmic noise. The clay oil lamp looked so plain it hardly warranted a second glance. Just a deep bowl, hand-shaped slightly off-center, with a narrow spout for the linen wick to poke through. But don't let its happy farm appearance fool you in Ipu's time. It was the only rechargeable battery against the cosmic void. No power grid, no backup battery, and certainly no sunrise alarm app. Every spark of light that night depended entirely on a slow drip of castor oil feeding the burning wick. To craft this battery, potters in the village of Kamambo rose before dawn. They mixed Nile River clay-sticky mud flecked with tiny shell fragments with fine sand, kneading until the mass squelched like pickled cabbage. The clay was rolled into balls, hand-molded and carefully pinched to form a pointed spout, like a duck's beak. The raw lamps dried under the sun for 3 days until their skin turned chalky white, then were stacked in a kiln fired with acacia wood. Acacia burned with a green flame, low ash, and just the right heat to keep the lamp's reddish-brown hue without cracking. Each batch yielded over 100, lined up like a miniature army awaiting orders. On the base, artisans carved a feather or lotus, both decorative and a boast of authentic Kamambo origin. But the lamp's soul was castor oil, the biofuel extracted from castor beans growing wild on riverbanks. The beans were lightly roasted to crack their shells, then pressed by hand in wooden mortars. The oil flowed out pale gold, slightly fishy, but burned long and bright. In non-eclipse seasons, a modest household used less than half a jar for evening rituals. But when the message, "Apep's getting hungry," spread across the dunes, demand skyrocketed. According to the priest-cum-tax officer Mena's records, Thebes alone drank roughly 7,000 liters of oil in an eclipse month, a thriving shadow economy, perversely prosperous. One person's night of terror was another's bumper harvest. Mena, short and wiry, had a knack for mental math faster than a goldsmith scraping metal. Every morning, he sat at a stone table in the oil market, 3 balanced scales and a bamboo ledger studded with counting sticks before him. When a trader hauled in oil, he nodded a greeting, already jotting 1/10 on the ledger's edge. This was the ritual tax. Every jar sold owed a small spoonful to the temple, to fuel the flames protecting the kingdom, Mena explained, eyes twinkling like he'd just told a joke. Traders grumbled but poured, because who dared skimp under Apep's nose? Thus, a cycle took shape. Fear, buy oil, pay tax, light lamp, less fear, run out of oil. The loop spun faster, As cement drums pounded relentlessly, oil prices, predictably, soared. Sellers shouted, "1 jar for faith, 2 for guaranteed dawn, 3, no haggling." Their calls echoed off brick roofs, reaching Ipu's home, where Mert was checking the oil left in their jar. She saw only a dark smear at the bottom and sighed. Ipu caught her look, grabbed a woven basket, and headed to market, much like countless modern trips to fill the tank. At the oil stall, Ipu handed over 3 shell coins, his other hand rubbing the lamp's handle as if soothing a child. The merchant Tutu, pot-bellied, flashed a smile as thick as his back fat, pouring oil through a copper funnel. As he worked, he pitched, "3 jars will do for the night, but if thunder's late, how about a 4-jar combo with a windproof wick thrown in?" Ipu shook his head. A sculptor didn't chisel all day to splurge recklessly. He countered with a quip. "If Ra oversleeps, I'll bill APEP for a refund," Tutu roared, knocking off half a coin. Both walked away pleased. One saved enough for a bowl of porridge, the other closed a deal. That evening, in their small workshop, Ipu and Mert set 3 oil jars beside the lamp like a secure supply line. Pippi, mesmerized by the burning wick, asked, "Father, why doesn't the lamp grow up with me?" Ipu ruffled his son's hair and said, "Because it learned to burn long, not to grow big. Big doesn't always mean bright, but burning long keeps the whole house at peace." The answer, pure ancient energy engineer, left Pippi wide-eyed before he hugged his wooden Anubis and drifted into dreams. Meanwhile, at the market, Mena carefully sealed the tax well with beeswax, tallying the day's haul. He scribbled a note. "Fear of darkness drives consumption. Suggest the dynasty consider stimulating demand via rituals?" A few young scholars, sneaking a peek, chuckled. This master invented marketing 3,000 years ago. But Mena wasn't joking. The revenue funded new drums for Karnak, replaced bronze mirrors, and sustained the Nile Basin's grandest alarm system. A few streets away, Kamambo's pottery kilns glowed red. Master potter Reckmeyer fired a second batch of lamps that night, eyes stinging from smoke. An apprentice splashed cold water on the kiln walls, grinning at the hiss. Reckmeyer said, "Every sorrow's cycle, APEP sends us orders. As long as eclipses haunted the skies, those tiny clay bowls would keep saving humanity and the potter's purses." Late that night, Ipu checked the oil. The first jar was low, the second uncapped, the third untouched at a textbook 3, layer insurance. He tilted the lamp. The flame stretched into a thin petal, illuminating a wisp of resin smoke. Outside, the soundscape had softened from metallic symphony to the faint hum of insects. Like every other household, they rested easy, knowing their clay battery was running at full capacity. Before bed, Mert reminded Ipu to save some oil for tomorrow. Egyptians never burned through their battery in one go. Ipu nodded, closed his eyes, and thought of Mena, Reckmeyer, and the fire supply chain stretching from Castor Fields to Karnak's halls. Everyone was a link in that Wi-Fi of light. And just like you, clutching your phone to hear this tale, they only hoped their small device wouldn't die mid-journey. So, whether you're in California or Ohio, if your bedside lamp's battery is flashing red, don't panic. Remember the Thebans who relied on a clay bowl and 3 jars of oil to outlast a cosmic shadow. Plug in, breathe deep, and let the crackle of a 3,000-year-old wick lull you to sleep. Ra always returns, as long as someone's patient enough to pour the oil. Amenhotep III, the Sunday king, who often boasted of being Ra's incarnation, faced a rare sunless day. News of the serpent's shadow, reached the palace just as lunch-dried grapes and barley beer was served. The court scribe noted, the palace gates slammed shut, bronze bolts were fastened, and the steward frantically dashed about collecting all the white linen. The goal was quintessentially feng shui, drape a massive cloth over the obelisk's tip to shield the sacred stone from cosmic dust. You'd think pharaohs were all effortlessly cool, but truth be told, they feared the dark just as much as the working folk in the streets. Amenhotep's panic was measured in lamps. In the royal library, a eunuch calculated, to banish the black rainbow, burn fire, lots of it. Thus, 500 clay lamps, premium ones glazed in blue fayenceware, paraded to the Nile's dock. Rowers arranged them along the wooden pier, each lamp spaced exactly 3 handbreadths apart to ensure the flames reflected continuously on the water. When every wick flared in unison, the Nile transformed into a giant mirror, casting a trembling ring of fire like a miniature sun. From his limestone balcony, Amenhotep, half arrogant, half trembling, hoped Apep would swallow this decoy sun and spare the real one teetering in the sky. But artificial light wasn't cheap. In half an hour, the palace treasury dispersed 200 jars of castor oil, equivalent to 3 months' wages for a small pyramid's construction crew. The man overseeing oil distribution was none other than High Treasurer Meneth, accountant you met at Thebes market. He instructed his scribe. Expense, dawn preservation category, divine fees, reason, prevent panic. The black-painted tablet's header read like a modern festival budget receipt. Inside Malkata's main hall, lighting grand lamps wasn't enough. The pharaoh ordered 4 bronze mirrors propped on cedar stands, their reflections bouncing light onto the gold-vaulted ceiling inlaid with lapis lazuli. The flickering effect made nobles squint, half convinced Ra was sending Morse code. Only Queen Tia, renowned for her sharp wit, smiled faintly. Your Majesty, Ra prefers calm over fireworks. Amenhotep tugged his cloak, coughed, and changed the subject. Tonight, he didn't want to seem less powerful, though his heart raced faster than Sememp drums. In the royal kitchen, the lamp slaves, all Nubian teens, took turns refilling oil. A boy named Hanu, pouring his 3rd jar, closed his eyes and prayed, Ra, get me through this shift. The linen wick, soaked with oil, pulsed with pale blue sparks, a sign of clean burning, no smoke, meeting treasury lamp standards. Hanu stifled a yawn. During an eclipse, sleep became a luxury good. Outside the palace, Thebes residents climbed sandy mounds to watch the royal light show. Ipu led Pippi onto the workshop roof, pointing to the glowing dock. See that? The pharaoh lights lamps like us. Pippi's eyes widened. So, will Apep be fooled, father? Ipu chuckled. The mighty sometimes fear just like the meek. What matters is who keeps their lamp steady. The words hung in the air, but Pippi got it. Courage wasn't measured by golden cloaks, but by keeping the flame even. The most perilous moment arrived. The sky's light sank to a steely hue, the Nile turned to a black mud ribbon, and the ring of fire on the water wavered in the wind. Amenhotep held his breath, his carnelian-ringed hand gripping the balustrade. Semempt drums outside the walls thumped slowly, as if warning that the battery in human hearts was draining. The eunuch's sharp breaths mingled with the crackle of oil. No one dared cough loudly. Then the universe answered. A diamond, bright corona flashed past the shadow's edge, sweeping a white beam onto the bronze mirrors. The mirrors bounced the first light back to the dock, where 500 lamps seemed divinely recharged. The water shimmered, creating the illusion of 2 sun-sewn reel, one fakerizing together. The boatmen dropped their oars, cheering like kids unwrapping Christmas gifts. Amenhotep clutched his chest, exhaled, but quickly composed a stern expression, as if to say, "I knew Ra would return." Moments later, as amber light bathed the palace, Queen Ta personally ordered the linen cloth removed from the obelisk. The white fabric fell, sand dust puffing lightly, revealing the gold-inlaid stone tip gleaming brilliantly. Ta turned to the pharaoh. "Ra doesn't mind a little dirt, Your Majesty." Her voice was gentle as a lullaby, but everyone caught the reminder. Fear spares no crown. That afternoon, the palace annals added a line. Eclipse in the 30th regnal year. Palace maintained order. Sun returned via the sacred flame ritual. Naturally, no mention was made of Hanu's sweat or the castor oil's cost. Ancient history often worked like social media. Only the glossy angles got shown. That evening, Ipu poured the last few drops of oil into the lamp, the third jar's seal still unopened. He watched the faint smoke trail, reflecting high power or sculptor's hands. All shared the same fear of darkness. The difference lay only in how each prepared their backup battery. With that, he hugged Pippi, whispering, "Never let the lamp go out halfway." Pippi nodded, eyelids drooping, carrying the tale of two sons into his dreams. "And you dozing off in Boston or Denver if tomorrow's schedule looms like Apep's shadow, recall Amenhotep III's lesson. Prepare your lamp, burn the flame steady, even craft a fake sun if needed. Then any shadow will pass. As long as your heart holds a tiny spark of hope, bright enough to outwit every fear. Now breathe deep. Picture the Nile gilded in gold, the clank of iron shields fading, and let sleep drape a cool linen cloth over your mind. Sweet dreams, your lamp's ready, and tomorrow's sun will surely rise." While the nobles prostrated themselves in prayer under the flickering torchlight by the dock, the lamp slaves orphaned Nubian children silently played the role of night shift technicians, rarely acknowledged by history. The eldest, Saba, 13, with thin shoulders and a sweat-glistening forehead, carefully removed a charred wick, whispering, "Psst," to signal Keto for a fresh linen one. Tiny Keto, her chin barely reaching the wooden pier's edge, clutched the wick roll like a teddy bear. As Saba threaded the linen into the lamp's spout, castor oil spilled, coating his dark fingersa greasy hand cream that left the night air tangy. Finishing the task, they earned no applause. Their only reward was the distant sigh of relief from the palace, proof their lamps still burned steady. For Saba, an eclipse meant overtime. During the first watch, replace wicks every 10 semimp drumbeats. In the second, every 5 as the oil thinned. By the third, when the final corona was about to flarix, were swapped. By feel. No clocks, no schedules. Their pace was set by the nobles trembling. The more they quaked, the faster the kids moved. The two pushed their lamp cart like baristas, switching from nitro coffee to brewing light. All that was missing was a smartwatch flashing battery levels. If they had one, it'd likely glow white all night. Not unlike modern, unpaid overtime standards. From the dock's corner, Hanutha Nubian boy who refilled palace oil sent a whistled signal, hugging a jar so heavy it hunched his back. Each swaying step rippled the river's fiery reflections. He warned, "Don't let the wicks run dry. Taxman Mena counts every drop short us, and we lose a meal." Saba raised an oil-slicked finger, grinning wryly. "I just wish Mena counted our sweat drops too." The kids stifled giggles, then bent back to their makeshift shift chart. Who swaps wicks? Who wipes spouts? Who pours oil? Sleepy sniffles formed an off-key choir, evoking a 3 a.m. startup off, except here, there was no free pizza, and the deadline literally loomed overhead. On the limestone balcony, Pharaoh Amenhotep III looked down, his brow less furrowed since the sun's corona reappeared. Arms crossed, silk cloak rustling, he turned to Queen Ta. "Those children are brave, aren't they?" Ta, her voice soft as scented linen, replied, "They warm the Empire's faith, Your Majesty. Ra surely sees the socket they've plugged." Amenhotep gave a strained chuckle. He knew full well that if a single lamp went out, his unconquered pharaoh legend would crack. That fragile realization kept his regal eyes wide open all night. Downstream, Ipu and Pipi sat on the workshop roof, the boy dozing against his father's shoulder. Pipi mumbled, voice thick with sleepy haze, "Father, why don't those kids go to bed?" Ipu stroked his hair, pointing to the radiant dock. "They're like you watching your kitten at night, except their kitten's as big as the sun. Duty unfinished, sleep comes later." Pipi blinked hard to stay awake, heart swelling with pity and awe. His young mind grasped that courage didn't care for crowns or bare feet. By the fourth watch, the Semimp drums fell silent. The night tipped toward dew, but the lamp cart still glowed red with oil. Saba stole a moment to dunk his hands in the river, the icy water numbing an oil burn. He pictured friends hunting antelope on Nubian plains, a pang of homesickness stirring. Yet, glancing up at the first faint dawn streak, Saba smiled softly, not for a hunting triumph, but for keeping hope's spark alive on both Nile banks. He counted under his breath. Last wick, last oil, Ra's back. Pale gray light spread across the river, touching the clay lamps. They didn't extinguish right away. They flickered a moment longer, like a phone screen fading to sleep mode. Keto craned her neck, eyes crusty, chirping, "We won." The group slapped their oily palms, the wet smacks like damp confetti, a low-budget celebration, but warmer than any grand banquet. Hanu hoisted an empty oil jar, solemnly setting it at the pier's edge, a makeshift trophy. At the palace, Ta quietly ordered, "Distribute honey cakes to the lamp team." A wooden tray slid down the sandy slope, laden with golden triangular pastries. Saba caught it, handing Keto the first piece. The honey's tingle, laced with faint date-flavored beer yeast, made them forget their calloused hands. Amenhotep III, foregoing a grandiose speech, silently slipped a gold sun-shaped medallion meant for General Sinto Saba's hand. The boy froze, then bowed deeply a moment later. "I'll light lamps better, Your Majesty." Tai glanced at her husband, smiling. When fear fades, gratitude speaks. The sun cleared the horizon, the dock's flames dimming. The Nubian kids were finally herded to the storehouse, where straw mats awaited. Before closing his eyes, Saba pulled the night's shortest wick from his tunich's trophy to tuck under his pillow. He pressed his ear to the dry straw, the distant river lapping like oars. A dream, smooth as castor oil, washed over him, carrying a whisper, "Ra, I'm sleeping now." Ipu carried Pipi inside, shut the wooden door, and set the smoldering lamp on its shelf. He murmured to Mert, "Today, I'll buy a new oil jar to thank those small hands at the dock." Mert nodded, spreading a mat, her thoughts on Saba, Keto, and Hanu. Outside, a sun medallion gleamed on some child's chest, catching the first rays like a diploma from a crash course in cosmic blackout survival. And you teetering on the edge of sleep in Brooklyn or Austinif, you're up late tweaking slides or watching stocks, remember Amenhotep III's lamp slaves. They stayed awake so we'd have the sun. So don't burn yourself out skipping sleep. Shut the laptop, set Do Not Disturb, and let your imagination flow like castor oil. Saba's stoic smile will guard you, ensuring tomorrow's dawn arrives on time. Sleep well. Our hope's battery just got a full charge from those Nubian kids. As the last wisps of eclipse night mist lingered around Thebes' dock, the Nubian children, having dozed off beside their oil-depleted clay lamps, rested while downstream. Heliopolis awoke to an entirely different rhythm. The limestone plaza, where twin obelisks pierced the sky, had waited centuries for this moment. Priests astronomers, draped in thin linen, stepped out silently, carrying nilometers and bamboo tablets scrawled with symbols. As the sun peaked, the massive stone pillars cast sharp shadows across the sand. A clock, Hand's precision, and for them, this was the truest measure of Ra's thoughts. After a night of trembling before Apep's jaws, with lamps kept burning and the court secured, the kingdom now faced a pragmatic aftermath. When would the Nile flood? The Saros cycle sometimes mischievously aligned eclipses with the early Akhet planting season, and as the shadow passed, the obelisk's shadows shifted oddly, disrupting the steady numbers priests had tracked for years. Ankhor, the observatory's high priest, planted a wooden rod in the sand, measuring the distance from the pillar's base to the shadow's edge, then cross-checked it against a stone tablet of 40 years' records. The shadow stretched 2 fingers longer, enough for him to conclude the flood would arrive half a moon late. A verdict as simple as a scratch in the dirt, yet the fields lining both Nile banks pivoted on it. The news sped off on donkeyback, no commentary, just a few slashed symbols for flood timing. In Thebes, Ipu, wiping oil from his hands after his lamp vigil, read the wooden message board and grimaced. A late flood meant parched soil, tough plowing, and seeds lying dormant, losing vigor. A sculptor like him would need temple overtime to barter for grain to offset the shortfall. At the market dock, Merchant Tutu swiftly set up a small stall beside his half-empty oil barrels, hawking futures contracts for next season's oil at a premium, as delayed waters would ground castor-laden boats. Tax officer Mena, his hair still scented with last night's pine resin, stood nearby, logging new tariff charts. An eclipse was both a religious rite and a flashing risk alert for the royal treasury. Not far off, the farming couple Noct and Merit were already in their fields at dawn. Noct eyed the sky that had borne the shadow yesterday, uneasy. Would Ra, angered, delay the waters? Their plowed fields were ready, but the soil was cracking. If the Nile didn't flood soon, the wheat seeds he'd buried would wither. No villager could afford extra oil for prolonged palace-style prayers. Their only choice was to adapt their livelihood. That night, Noct counted his goats, marking 3 with red chalk for sale, trading them for sacks of drought-tolerant sesame. Amid the straw-fire kitchen smoke, he pinned the Heliopolis notice to the reed wall, a reminder to pivot early, for the obelisk's shadow never lied. In Heliopolis, Ankhor and his apprentice Nebet stayed in the plaza until noon, completing a new set of measurements. The summer sun blazed, but the shadow, now shorter than at dawn, confirmed their findings. Nebet added a deviation column to the ledger, her eyes dry despite last night's lamp vigil. Without computers, they mentally traced a smooth curve, marred only by the eclipse's shadow. That blemish was a warning for the empire, from sculptors to oil traders, from sleeping lamp slaves to the burdened pharaoh. A second message left Heliopolis by late afternoon, relayed through watchposts and pinned to Thebes' market bulletin pole. The flood was delayed, but by no more than half a month. Those who could hold out would see their fields watered. No need to repurchase seeds. That night, as the Nubian children woke for their regular lamp duties, this time just for the palace's evening rites, Saba quietly picked up a fresh wick, his under-eye shadows lighter. He didn't grasp sine curves or Saros cycles, but he felt the connection, the cosmic shadow, the rosy corona, the obelisk's shade, the tax ledgers, and even the small honey cake basket TA sent at noon were links keeping the river flowing on time. The eclipse story, then, was never just a light show. Last night, it challenged primal fear, forcing oil-slicked little hands to tend the flame. This morning, it crept into the obelisk plaza, etching a stroke in the annals, and by dusk, it became a price chart at the dock, shaping a farmer's dinner. For the Nile Empire, the shadow was a debt notice nature sent early. They read it with night lamps, stone shadows, and cautious heartbeats, so when the sun returned, everyone knew when to sow, stock oil, or stow their chisels. At history's far end, you eyes half closed before a blue screen air, reading shadows in your own way, stock charts, pay stubs, visa deadlines, or just your phone's battery bar. Your bedside lamp needs no caster. Seattle's skies don't wait for Nile floods, but the principle holds: watch small shadows to predict big currents. So let the Nile's ancient sigh lull you through the night. Trust that tomorrow's dawn will cast a new mark, and you'll adjust in time, just as Angkor did 3,000 years ago with his silent, unerringly precise obelisk. Sleep well. To the distant murmur of sand recounting seasons of floods that never missed their cue. Have you ever taken a deep breath in a pine forest as the wind shifts? Picture that scent, then add a touch of overcooked honey, sprinkle in fine charcoal soot like eyeshadow powder, and blend it with the vapor rising from the Nile after a scorching day. That's the aroma of Egyptian resin, camel's perfume, that priests drizzled onto lamp wicks before every palace ritual. One drop filled a chamber, 100 turned Karnak's great hall into an incense cauldron, and thousands welcome to a pungent, smoky evening where gray haze shimmered like silk draped over the shoulders of Horus's statue. The scene began as the sun vanished behind the western dunes. News of the flood's half-moon delay had just spread, but the court upheld its custom of a Thanksgiving night, a night brimming with lamps, not water, to thank Ra for, not punishing harsher. Clay lamps were lashed with rope into clusters of 6, hung from lotus-shaped stone dishes atop columns. Skilled guards tied floral knots. The lazy ones looped carelessly, leaving the rope frayed like unkempt hair. Every 5 steps stood a column, the corridor spanning 70, plus a small altar, a cement drum band, the harem quarters. You've done the math. Over 3,000 flames flared almost at once, like LED lights spelling, "Thanks Ra," in smoky Morse code. As the linen wicks soaked up oil, the first flame snapped a tiny pop. That sound, repeated thousands of times, merged into a dry rainfall. Each flame, barely 2 knuckles high, sprouted as thick as an upside-down starry sky, except real stars twinkled, while these oil stars shyly exhaled smoke. The smoke, black tinged with gray, turned faintly purple, then pale blue under the golden firelight, as if an invisible painter swept a gradient brush through the air. It slithered from the dish's rims, crawled along limestone carvings, and clung to Horus's folded wings, weaving a misty night robe for the god. The statue, no longer cold stone, sat enthroned in damp haze, like the lead in an ancient noir film, majestic yet faintly weary. The weariest, of course, were the guards standing splay-legged under each column, ordered to keep eyes open, shoulders square, and spears upright. They struggled as resin's pungence turned their tongues bitter. Smoke grazed their eyelids, oil-slicked brows itched, but they dared not scratch. The low, steady drumbeat wove through the haze, thumping their chests like an anxious heartbeat. One young guard wiggled a toe, his joints cracking softly. The sound blended with the fire's crackle and drifted into the smoke. Minutes later, he yawned first. 2 columns back, a comrade yawned second, a cosmic domino effect of drowsiness. Rumor had it the priests mixed in belladonna resin powder, the national sedative to calm jittery guards. They didn't expect it to lull. The pharaoh, too. Indeed, Amenhotep III, stepping into the hall's threshold, coughed lightly into his hand. Queen Ta, beside him, gently waved a palm leaf fan, a graceful but futile gesture. After 3 strokes, smoke had seeped into her dress folds, making the silk cling warmly, like a quilt by a hearth. The fan-bearers in the shadows, bored, swung wildly, accidentally sending a fragrant gust toward the band. The drummer choked, missing a beat, and the ensemble paused for a moment. No one complained, as the smoke began lulling an unintended mass sedation plot never worked so well. In a dim corner, the Nubian children tending wicks started a new shift. Saba led, eyes still red from last night's sleep debt. He lifted an oil can, stepping slowly to avoid slipping on soot-slicked tiles, but the choking haze made his hands tremble. A few drops splashed, hit the floor, flared briefly, and died. Saba sniffed, still grinning. "Ra, stop teasing me." The self-mutter faded in the smoky air, mistaken for a breeze's hum. Years later, archaeologists would debate, was the thick soot on Karnak's ceiling from a fire or these incense, heavy Thanksgiving nights? The real answer lay in Saba's curly hair, then drenched in oil and scented with burnt honey. As smoke thickened, flames dimmed, and the corridor floated on gray clouds. If you're following this tale, close your eyes for a second. Imagine that haze as a soft fleece blanket, the fire's pops as a sleep sounds app's track, the alien honey resin scent like an overburned candle in your living room. In Thebes, Mertipu's wife caught the same aroma, carried faintly by a northern breeze into her courtyard. She stirred the last batch of barley cakes, thinking, late flood or not, the crops will carry this smoke's depth. That flavor, through her hands, became the Skyfire cakes, a hit at next season's market, though no one traced their inspiration to the pungent Thanksgiving rite. Amid the haze, High Priest Ankh-Hor, fresh from Heliopolis to report, ascended the steps. He glanced at the smoke, bowed low, sniffed, and smiled, satisfied. Perfect ratio. For him, smoke density was data. Thicker meant steady, burning lamps, oil not draining fast. They said Ankh-Hor measured scents like obelisk shadows. Tonight, the aroma was deep enough to cradle an empire's sleep. Outside the walls, the resin scent faded into the night, leaving a faint smoky trail in the warm air. Guards yawned less as the breeze shifted, bringing cool, damp Nile vapor. The lamps kept burning, but those on watch stopped thinking of APEP, obelisks, or oil tariffs. All sank into the soft rhythm of wicks and drums, like 2 hands rocking a giant hammock cradling Karnak's complex. You arranging your pillow can borrow that smoke, wrapping your mind, tying back tense thoughts, like resin binding tiny flames to linen wicks. Let the burnt honey tang guide your senses out of tonight's room, strolling under smoke-stained lotus columns, then quietly returning to lay a light dream on your eyelids. Perhaps in sleep, you'll slump against Horus's misty-robed shoulder, hearing the god whisper, "Sleep, Ra's on watch." Better than any app, right? Sweet dreams, under the resin smoke blanket of an ancient Egyptian night, waking tomorrow free of soot but with a warm, slightly singed honey tail on the tip of your memory's tongue. As the resin smoke veil over Karnak's heights thinned, restoring the sky to soot-streaked stars, another fragment of ancient Egypt's memory emerged. On a sandstone stele in Pi Ramesses, Ramesses II's northern capitolines, are carved that modern museum guides still recite syllable by syllable, the black shadow bit at Ra. We answered with 10,000 fires. Those words, from the 9th year of the great pharaoh's reign, chronicle an eclipse long faded into dust, but vivid enough to seed fear in the people's imagination. The tale goes that the night before that shadow, the court had just audited stores after an unexpectedly low flood. Ramesses, who built temples grander than any, heard his treasurers whisper that the coffers creaked like warped wood. At that moment, Heliopolis's astronomers delivered news. The Saros cycle was threading its needle, an eclipse due mid-month in the peak of Akhet. So, foregoing Karnak's elaborate smoky Thanksgiving rites, Ramesses opted for a blunt marketing solution. Light so many fires the shadow would retreat. He ordered potters across the delta drafted, kilns firing 10,000 clay lamps round the clock. Lamps barely cooled before the next furnace roared. Bread-selling children in Pi Ramesses market savored the scent of baked clay, unaware they'd soon be conscripted to wick this army of light. Meanwhile, the stele's scribe, an artisan named Khonsu, hunched over, chiseling the slogan, "The black shadow bites Ra, 10,000 fires reply." He honed the words to be crisp, so when the lamps blazed, the phrase would sear into every onlooker's eyes like a promise free of tremors. By dawn on eclipse day, Pi Ramesses simmered with delta heat. Market traders in Nagul thought it merely a prelude to midday's scorching gusts. They didn't know that when the moon's disk veiled the sun, swirling winds would shift, shrieking through narrow alleys like a lurking beast. The lamp-wiping children worked feverishly, wicks nearly dry but hands slick with sweat, oil resin matting their hair into brown, root-like strands. At the fated hour, the shadow slithered over the sun's edge, coiling the blue sky into its core, like a boiling oil vat suddenly turned low. The Sharuhan Canal's waters mirrored a warped corona, while palace walls became indigo-dyed cloth. Then came the roar not Apep or Ra's thunder, but hot winds funneling through limestone corridors, scraping so fiercely they resonated. Imagine whistling through twisted copper pipes, then amplifying it 1,000-fold. That was the moment's soundtrack. Naturally, human psychology hadn't taken an aerodynamics class. Hearing the stone walls screech, they wove instant myths. Apep rages at mankind's provocative flames. An old herb. Seller shoved her watercress basket into the canal, insisting. The sky. Swallowing snake just spat poison. A man at a wine stall poured fresh castor oil from a gourd, shouting, "More fuel, higher flames, the snake retreats." Instantly, oil demand surged. In mere moments, castor traders reaped 10 days' sales. Mena, the tax officer stationed south, hearing of price spikes, jotted a margin note. Wind sound also counts as spending stimulus. Ramesses' command took shape. 10,000 lamps multiplied light across the canals. Mingling with the wind, the flames formed a blazing wall, turning thatch roofs into dancing shadow puppets. The smoke, lacking Karnak's honeyed aroma, was raw with fresh-pressed oil and rusted metal from lamppost stakes, a distinctly industrial room spray. It didn't soothe but stung, making dye warehouse guards chant mantras while wrapping their heads in cloths. Yet, harsh as it was, the city held firm. At the eclipse's peak, the last light ray vanished into the black rim like cooled metal thread. Pi Ramesses fell breathless, resigned. Only the wind's howl and oil's faint pops remained, as if the cosmos held its breath for a final call. Then a needle of light pierced the disk's edge. The diamond effect flashed white, spilling into smoke, painting a gossamer rainbow over stone steps. Market folk broke the silence spell with chaotic claps, like suburban crowds finishing popcorn at an open-air film. Throats parched from smoke still cheered, proof Ra hadn't judged harshly. A group of children tossed wet wicks into the canal, flames hissing out but leaving fragrant ash to dust the water with shimmering flecks. Mothers stoked sidewalk braziers, fanning coals and joking that the earlier howling heat was just APEP passing gas. Finally, Ramesses appeared at the east gate. His golden cloak, smudged with soot, still caught the light. He walked slowly, eyeing the lamp's lingering glow, then the sun's disk, now whole. No rallying cries, no kneeling prayers, just a raised hand, like an old painter checking a finished canvas. He knew he'd won by the sheer scale of rapid flames, and the crowd's fear, amplified to fever pitch by the timely hot winds. The stele later bore a summary, timeless as a PR campaign slogan: 10,000 fires quench the black shadow. Terse, potent, leaving room for imagination. Modern science would coolly explain. Eclipse winds shift due to thermal gradients, sudden hot-cold contrasts between shadowed and sunlit zones. But that explanation couldn't warm Nock's evening stew or conjure magic to keep Mert's bread buyers. It was the shrieking wind's breath that spurred more oil purchases, elevating the secondary economy Egypt had chased since Amenhotep's days to new prosperity. Night cloaked Ramesses again, this time shadow-free. The lamps, battered by gusts, burned lower, their wicks' embers flickering on final threads. A city guard stamped his sandals on stone for warmth, looked up, and saw the sun's diamond streak faded, only a comet's tail trailing east. He recalled the stele's words, muttering, "Black shadow bites Ra. 10,000 fires reply." The phrase became a dynasty's lullaby. If a shadow ever swallows the sky, gather fire lamp fire, oil fire, heart fire, and wait for the wind to tell its tale. Even in sleep, don't forget to change the wick. And you, nestled somewhere in warm blankets and AC, the next time you hear wind whistling through a door crack as your bedside lamp casts shadows, think back to Ramesses. It might just be air shifting, but perhaps it's a gentle nudge. Pour a bit more oil into your stubborn flame, for every shadow slips away when the sun climbs high. Breathe deep, inhale, imagine smoke, picture yourself amid 10,000 ancient lamps, letting the wind's slow tail lull you. Sleep well, under your own light campaign, just bright enough to banish the petty shadows in your mind. No need for 10,000, just one, burning steady. The memory of Ramesses II's 10,000 fires drifted upriver on castor-laden boats, reaching the artisans' town of Deir el-Medina, tucked behind Thebes' rocky cliffs. This village, known for crafting royal tombs, was typically reserved, but its people wouldn't be outdone by Ramesses in ingenuity. They lacked vast oil reserves, or the means to muster 10,000 lamps, but they had Bakhet, a priestess so obsessed with optics, she polished bronze mirrors rounder than the village bakery's flatbreads. After the jarring eclipse, Bakhet began dreaming up a pocket flashlight for the heavens. She roamed the bronze workshop, scavenging scrap sheets, heating them soft, hammering them thin, and buffing until they gleamed like the Nile at noon. One tin bronze mirror, no wider than a barley loaf, reflected torchlight so brightly that potters squinted as if zapped by a 21st century laser. This was the SOS flare. Bakhet believed Ra would readore, so she hoped. The night before her test, the town buzzed like a fair. Rumors that Bakhet had hacked the sun's orbit spread faster than Semip drumbeats. Some sold tickets to see the flash. Others peddled snacks dubbed Ra's Mirror Cakes Flat. honey, glazed, sprinkled with tin dust for flair. In the courtyard corner, mural painters chuckled. If Ra opens his eyes, he'll spot our stall first. The vibe was festive yet oddly lulling. The distant echo of 10,000 fires had squeezed out terror, leaving only playful curiosity, like staying up for Disney fireworks, knowing it's safe but still counting down with bated breath. Beckett chose a flagpole by the cliff as her light launch platform, tall enough to clear mud roofs but shorter than the mountain peak. It wouldn't misfire, torchlight into vulture caves. She climbed stone steps, secured the mirror to a triangular wooden frame, tied it with jute cords, and stepped back to admire her work, a mirror poised to swallow fire and spit beams. Nubian children, fresh from wicking Karnak's lamps, wandered by, craning their necks, eyes aglow. They whispered, "She's stealing lightning." Sincere praise that made Beckett snort, her faience bead necklace jangling. As the sun dipped orange, Beckett lit the first resin-soaked torch at the pole's base. The familiar, trusty burnt honey stench wafted, carried by the breeze. Villagers formed a circle, keeping distance to avoid sneezing out the flame. Village Chief Mary Ray, a wiry elder who carved coffins, clutched a rhino-hide drum as MC. He struck 3 deep beats. Stage Belsan declared, "If Ra sees the beam, may he spare our sprouting fields, save our sculptors' chisels, and keep the baker's loaves unburnt." Laughter rippled, echoing off cliffs in a giggling reverb, making the mood ever sleepier. Beckett raised the torch, tilting it at a precise 45 degrees to the mirror. Flash. A narrow beam shot into the twilight sky, no longer than a child's sword, but bright enough to make someone blink. It veered, sweeping across early stars. 2 kids gasped. "Look," Ra winked back. Their mother shushed them with a finger, fearing godly offense. Yet that fleeting moment hushed the crowd. For the first time, they saw a beam controlled by mortal hands, not heaven's lightning. Beckett swept again, flicking her wrist to pulse the light, like a stage spotlight. Each beam lasted half a breath, fading then flaring, a Morse code of her mind. "Ra Ra, we're here. Deir el Medina," though the words lived only in her head. The sky didn't answer, naturally, save for a whooshing gust through rock crevices, a mini apex growl the villagers had heard about from Pi Ramesses traders last night. Startled, they exchanged glances, recalling Ramesses' stale, "The black shadow bites Ra." Reflexively, a painter poured oil from a jar into a nearby clay brazier, kindling a backup flame, raising the market's lamp count to 7. Another rushed forward with a spare torch, ready to reload the mirror if Beckett signaled. But the priestess waved them off. "That's enough. Now we wait." She set the torch in its holder, letting the flame stand still, its orange glow singeing the mirror's edge. The flashes ceased, leaving a faint reflected gleam dancing in the dusty air, like a placeholder on a round-trip ticket. The village sprawled on the ground, chins propped. Silence stretched, the breeze cooled, and the resin's bite softened, mingling with post-sunset damp earth. Ree's drum slowed to a steady backbeat, sinking hearts to a rhythm like tires humming on a long road. You're probably picturing it. Oh, so Ra appeared, firing back a cosmic flare? Nope. The sky just darkened, stars multiplied, the odd meteor streaking briefly. But what happened below was just as memorable, a psychological shift. When the flashes stopped, the villagers weren't disappointed. Instead, they felt an odd calm, as if they'd personally tightened Earth's axis. Honey cakes sold out. Date. Wine jugs ran dry. Chatter faded to whispers. The community slipped into an unplanned half-meditation, like blowing out birthday candles and suddenly feeling complete. Around the first watch, Beckett signaled to lower the mirror. She shooed the village lads, no more oil needed. The main torch was capped, its flames snuffed, a wisp of smoke dissolving in the mountain breeze. Mary Ray packed his drum, slung it over his shoulder, and chuckled. So, the orbits hacked. The quip hung lightly, but everyone laughed, believing in their own way. If the gods didn't see, at least they'd seen themselves bold enough to cast a beam into the night's dome. The calming effect seated by Priestess Baket's mirror in Deir el-Medina spread swiftly. By midnight, the village had retreated to their backyards, trading cheers for hushed murmurs of shared stories. No one wanted to wake Ra from his night sky rest, let alone foolishly provoke Apep, rumored to still slither along the eastern edge, flicking a tail long as the Milky Way, seeking any lapse. So, adults gathered to set out barley cakes baked that afternoon, cooled until their edges hardened but wafting a faint husk scent. Children lugged half-fermented date beer vats, fizzing lightly like diet soda. A night watch, with no screens or Dolby speakers, yet everyone sat upright, facing the horizon where a thin, fiery halo lingered, a memory of the eclipse. Each family spread reed mats on the sand, arranging cakes in a circle, a soot-stained lamp at the center still, carrying the resin tang of recent rites. The flame just bright enough to light faces, not flaring too high, lest Apep mistake it for a new challenge and lash back. Ipu, with Mert and Pippi, squeezed into the crowd, leaning against a brown mud wall. He broke flatbread into pieces, dipping them lightly in beer foam, savoring the malty crunch, and whispered, "Once, in Jezer's tomb, I saw a mummy with a gold mask, looking like it just dozed off." Pippi, wide-eyed with fear but eager, opened his mouth for crumbs, his gaze glued to the tiny fiery halo. A few mats over, Sabath, a Nubian boy skilled at wicking, murmured Baket's bronze mirror recipe. First, mix lemon water with charcoal ash. Then swirl fine sand in circles until you see two noses in the reflection. His friends gaped, picturing their soot-smeared faces doubled, then burst into laughter, only to be shushed by adults fearing the sky. Serpent scales might bristle. Mummy tales exhausted, the mural painters pivoted to oil taxes. Ramesses' 10,000 fires would likely spike castor prices next year, a boon for castor field owners. The money talk sounded dry, but in this setting, it was like sheep ambling through a meadow of memory-lulling listeners' eyelids. Voices softened, beers chill-cooled tongues, cold barley cakes filled bellies just enough, and mountain gap winds hummed like old fans, all wrapping people in the rhythm of a long, undefined dawn wait. Occasionally, a faint hiss broke through. Someone pinched a wick, checking oil. The flame wavered, casting a dim glow on cheekbones and linen hems, then steadied. The motion repeated so rhythmically Pippi caught the pattern. 10 breaths, adjust wick. 10 breaths, adjust wick. He whispered to Mert, "Why not make the flame bigger to see better?" She rubbed his shoulder. "Too high, it burns the cakes. Ra will see, don't worry." Her voice, soft but warm with subtle humor, added, "We're not Netflix, just streaming enough." From afar, a clatter rose. Riverbank soothsayers tapped small drums, not to scare but to sustain a soothing rhythm. The buffalo hide thumps faltered, then paused, evoking a half-dozing heartbeat. No need to strain, just let the pulse slow. Backyard sitters tuned to the sound, counting sheep by drumbeats. Sheep 1, sheep 2, sheep 3, even Ipu, soot still smudged on his cheek, nodded off, picturing Jezer's mummy half-spirit, half-flesh, murmuring goodnight, a thought so amusing it banished fear. Past midnight, Becket's mirror had sparked faith. Now, That faith wasn't flashes but as still as steady stars. Big matters, Nile floods, oil prices, wick taxes were tucked into tunic pockets for tomorrow. In this half-lit space, only drowsiness prowled like a cat across reed mats, brushing ankles, coaxing people to lean back. A few yawns slipped out, uncovered, floating up and fading under the endless sky. Ipu rested a hand on Pippi's back, feeling his breath flutter like a sparrow's wings. He glanced at Mert, lips twitching. "Tomorrow, I'll check the stone stock early. You can delay baking to save firewood." Mert nodded, eyelids heavy, her mind clinging to last night's resin scent, now mingling with the cake's malt. She thought, if Ra passed by, he'd smell this late supper simple but sincere. That was enough to ease her, loosening shoulders tensed from days of fire, tending. On the eastern sky, the black rim Apep bit yesterday faded, yielding to a faint purple blush. Those still awake pointed softly, not daring to cheer. "It's rising." A wordless command, but it spread like a spark. Lamps were lowered, wicks dipped into oil one last time, flames snuffed, thin smoke dissolving fast to clear the horizon for dawn's pink. Unlike Netflix ending an episode, no next episode prompt or rolling credits, just crickets warming up and the first glow nudging darkness into alley corners. Half-eaten barley cakes were broken, stored in baskets, beer dregs sealed in vats for next batch's yeast. People rose, brushing sand from robes, chattering like moviegoers leaving a slow-burn film, satisfied. No applause, no confetti, just exchanged glances. "See, we survived." Ipu hoisted a dozing Pippi onto his shoulder. The boy, half asleep, mumbled his unfinished sheep count, closing the odd-numbered loop with a soft snore. The sun cleared the mountain ridge, silent, no thunder, like a golden rivet quietly securing the sky after a repair. The Egyptians, with cold cakes in their stomachs and just enough date beer, gazed at that light without fanfare. They only pursed lips, breathed deep, and gave thanks in the quietest way of those who'd spent a night counting fiery halos instead of episodes. A breeze grazed empty reed mats, carrying a lingering whiff of barley. You propped on pillows before a screen close your eyes. Imagine nibbling a tough cake, sipping faintly fizzy beer, ears catching distant drums and the faint resin smoke on your shirt. Then count 1, 2, 3, knowing your alarm will ring soon enough. And when it does, like Thebes' dawning glow, you'll wake feeling safe through the long night. No late-night Netflix needed just a few barley grains, a gulp of date beer, and a reminder to keep your voice low, lest Apep stir. Sweet dreams. See you in the next segment when the sun's high enough to voice the secrets left unspoken tonight. As the eastern sky flushed pale pink, a small miracle sparked, a diamond fleck ignited on the shadow's edge, so dazzling that all of Deir el Medina, still drowsy from counting fiery halos collectively, held its breath. The first second was utter silence. Then the diamond ring burst into full corona, and cheers erupted like reed, firework crackles. Small drums clattered wildly, echoing off both cliff faces, startling white herons atop the rocks into flapping flight. The last lamps, their wicks just snuffed, became celebratory props. Nubian children tossed half-burnt wick husks onto the sand, embers sparking into human-made meteors, as if sprinkling glitter to complement the sun's gala. Priestess Backet, still draped in her ash-dyed shawl from last night's mirror, work-yanked the ram's horn waz from its pole, her first blow rasping like a distant ship's foghorn, the second ringing clear as silver, trailing a long resonant hum, like a train cutting through an Arizona canyon, thrilling with a touch of adventure, tour zest. The waz's call rippled outward. Smaller temples down the Nile Valley answered, notes rising in thirds and fifths, a 1,000, 300 BCE internal phone line. Thanks to this, Ipu, at the village's northern edge, caught the third call and knew the sky lamp was unlocked. He nudged Pipi, slumped to sleep on his shoulder. "Wake up," Raz struck his flint. The boy rubbed his eyes, saw the diamond streak spread like a brushstroke, and forgot the lingering date, beer drowsiness. At Karnak's gate, the oil crew, ever thrifty, wasted nothing. Leftover oil from jars was poured in even streams across the temple courtyard's clay. The act seemed reverent reluctance to discard liquid gold, but turned ingenious. The viscous oil soaked in, sealing sand dust. When the cheering crowd spilled into the plaza, dry sand underfoot met the lubricated ground, gliding smoothly, not a grain airborne. The archive priest, watching, nodded. 2 jobs in 1-0 sweeping, and the right ends with a polished wax finish. A New York City engineer would have jotted in their notebook, "Dust control for construction sites. Nile Tech." Saba and his friends, hair still reeking of castor oil, ran barefoot across the slick courtyard, leaving glossy footprints like kids smearing paint on tiles. Each mark mirrored a weary grin. The kids felt like assistant hackers in the blackout flip, though their real feat was just wicking lamps all night. Saba glanced skyward, whispering, "Ra, we're off shift." At 13, he tasted true clock-out relief like a 24/7 store clerk watching dawn rinse the night shift's scent from their nape. Mert warmed leftover barley cakes on a bronze dish. The diamond gleam caught their edges, as if glazing them silver. She handed one to Ipu, joking, "Negative, right?" The quip modern as a clear, rapid test, though no villager knew test kits, captured the same relief. Veins shedding tension, shoulders dropping knots, hearts pulsing steady like lo-fi beats. Pippi, catching snippets, didn't grasp test, but giggled, crumbs on his lips. Along the irrigation canal, farmer knocked, shouldered his hoe, checking fields early. He paused, shielding his eyes to admire the sky's diamond, shaking his head, disbelieving he'd won a bet against APEP. Last night's news of a half-moon flood delay held, but the dawning glow was like signing a spiritual credit contract. The sky renewed its promise. The land would yield sprouts. Knock tapped his heel on the dry field. Today, he'd start watering with small river jars until the Nile truly rose. Faith shone like the oil-sealed courtyard, simple, tough, a bit slippery, but who'd complain? In the main temple plaza, kids tossing wicks chanted a countdown. 3, 2, 1, then roared, "Ra wins." Mothers gently folded robes, stooping to gather cooled wicks, piling them into baskets for new ones. Egyptians wasted nothing. They mixed wick ash into statue plaster, spread leftover oil to seal courtyards, turned howling winds into reasons to buy oil, and made the diamond moment a spiritual medallion hung on every child's neck. Beckett, after a night of signaling, stretched, her neck creaking. She unhooked the bronze mirror, peering in, her face, the sun, and the fading fiery halo 3 layers of light colliding. She grinned like a leopard, hack successful. That smile, for a moment, shone as bright as the sky's true diamond, dazzling enough for a nearby painter's apprentice to think, "One day, I'll polish a mirror to catch the sun." Relief spread with the morning light. Sparrows swooped to the plaza's tiles, pecking scattered crumbs, then darted off, raising no dust on the oil-sealed ground. The Waz's call faded. In its place came soft, scraping steps, people folding mats, artisans pulling statue masks to wipe soot, and Pippi boasting to friends, "Last night, I counted 60 sheep." Apep's fast asleep. Life resumed, like a browser tab reopening post-update, no page lost. You curled in blankets, one eye sneaking open to read this. Imagine tossing a wick husk onto sand, hearing its faint fizz and fade. No diamond lamp needed. Your dented bedside light's glow on the wall is your own halo. Picture your ears catching an ancient waz, your chest sinking to delta drum beats, your heart easing like a negative result after a day's anxious test. Ra's back, the shadows gone. Old wicks turn to ash for soil, spare oil locks dust everything's in place. Now, breathe deep, snap your phone shut, yawn without fear of APEP, and let the diamond in your eyes close into a shimmering dream of your own. Sweet dreams. See you in the next part when the sun's high enough to tell of the reliefs etched with today's light. As the first sun rays lingered on rough-tiled roofs, Thebes' oil market gate swung wide. Merchant Tutipot bellied, eyes squinting but sharp as lightning stood in the center, reed pen freshly sharpened, scrawling on a wooden tablet. Last night, 40 jars gone. Double profit. He licked the pen's tip, adding a grand dash like signing an IPO, then looked up, grinning. New prices, but quick hands get old rates. No cement drum needed his shout circled once, pulling a crowd of buyers like a stock exchange opening bell. The reason was simple. The eclipse was over, castor oil stocks halved, and the signal-burning night had burned through supply. From Theban housewives to sculptors like Ipu, everyone vaguely grasped supply-demand, though microeconomics textbooks were far off. Once, a shell coin bought 2 nights' light. Now, it stretched to 1.5. Tutu swept chaff off a jar, booming. I'm not hiking prices. APEP's taxing the flames. No one argued. The cosmic villain was an easy scapegoat. On the stone steps, tax officer Menane a pale yellow cloak set up his shell abacus, red ink jar ready, his ancient CFO salary tied to Tutu's profits. Seeing prices climb, Mena smirked, satisfied. He logged the morning's note. Tranquil lamp fee. Add 4 barley grains per jar. The small script cut deep as a drill. In a flash, the villager's imagination conjured an unavoidable new cost. No wonder Mirthan's still dusted with baking flour groaned at the new price board. She queued behind bronze mirror polishers and dyers, counting fingers for the minimum jars to keep their home Ra-approved next night. Ipu elbowed in, taking the family's funds from her, joking, "Think of it as investing in a faith startup." The quip reached Tutu's ears. He roared with laughter, nodding, "I call it flare coin. More panic, more value." The jest made some chuckle, easing frowns over new prices. At the market's corner, Saba and his Nubian friends were tasked with hauling empty oil jars to the drying yard. Saba lifted one, shaking it to a hollow clunk, and sighed, "We poured too well last night. Bone, dry." His friend Keto drew a tiny APEP snake on the jar's rim, labeling it sold out. They giggled, feeling like logistics crew for a unicorn company. Though weary, they kept the insider fun vibe. The oil market boiled like a cauldron, but to kids, it was a game of who carries the bigger jar. Across the street, Nocdaily farmer hidden behind a wheat yoke hesitated at the price board. He needed oil for tomorrow's lamps, and to grease plow Axlisa multi-purpose oil, like moderns, buying olive oil for cooking and hair. But new prices forced budget cuts. Scratching his head, recalling Ramesses' 10,000 fires and Beckett's mirror beam, he hatched a plan. Mix castor oil with goat fat, usually just a skin balm. His wife Merritt, hearing this, gaped. "Goat roast stink at midnight? Ra'll be annoyed." Noct shrugged. Ra gets the poor. Their domestic haggle mirrored reality. Fear morphed into savvy consumer tactics. Tutu, flush with cash, new bubbles burst. He launched a bulk voucher deal, prepay 10 jars for next season at 90% of today's rate. The only instant taker was Potter Reckmeyer. He knew each eclipse spiked Thebes' lamp demand. His profit came from red-hot clay kilns. Locking in oil secured his supply chain. Lamps multiplied faster than APEP could turn. Tutu's startup morphed into Flare Chain, with the Potter as partner. In the market corner, Baquette skipped oil, buying scrap bronze mirrors from antique dealers. When Tutu asked, "No more fear of shadows?" she slid her basket of mirrors forward, replying, "I stockpile in lean seasons, polish when prices drop." To her, the oil price race was mere ripples on the river. Mirror-beamed light was the long-term investment. Her logic made Tutu pause his pen, wondering, sometimes the last laugh isn't the oil hoarders but the one turning light into a sky banner tech. Amid the bustle, Mena sealed his ledger with wax. He looked up to see Pippi perched on an empty jar singing, price up, wick to the moon. Even kids smelled money." Mena laughed, tossing Ipu a shell coin. "For the kids' cake, call it a future investor's grant." Ipu thanked him, tucking the coin into Pippi's tunic. The boy squealed, "Flare coin," in an Americanized twang, picked from Tutu, sparking crowd laughter. The sun climbed, heat-baking tiles, shouts subsiding. Oil prices settled at their new high. Tutu closed shop, ordering wet jute cloths to cool jars. At Mert's bakery, customers slowed, wallets light from oil, buying half cakes. Mert pivoted. A peace of mind combo, barley cake plus cheap pickled cucumber lemonade. It lured back oil, drained hungry buyers. In the post-eclipse market, everyone was a startup, differing only in cash or ingenuity. By noon, Nile breezes brought cool mist, easing the glare, and the market dispersed. Ipu lugged 2 oil jars home, fewer than planned but enough for the night. He thought, pricey, but cheaper than carrying the shadow. Pippi trailed, counting steps like sheep, mumbling, "Flare chain." Mert walked beside, fanning her hot cake basket. Honey, mingling with faint castor oil, surprisingly pleasant. If you, somewhere in New York, have seen folks hoard scented candles before a blackout warning or scramble for mini gas cans pre-snowstorm, Thebes' oil market isn't alien. The difference, APEP's shadow replaced tropical storm, and priest, CFO Mena stood in for a power company's tweet. Firth timeless engine drove people to buy what made them feel they controlled the dark. But the ending here is gentler than modern sale frenzies. Dusk settled, oil prices steadied, Bakett's mirror glowed pink in the yard, and Nacht's kitchen bubbled with goat fat not half bad. A new night loomed, but after a day of prices spiking like a negative test, Egyptians grasped a law. Shadows only tilt prices briefly. Dawn always resets the balance. With that lesson, you can calmly stow your backup candles, set down your device, and pull the blanket your startup of worry has closed the deal. Now just sleep to trade ideas by tomorrow's morning light. Sweet dreams in imagined castor scent. See you at the next market, maybe a dust-free pyramid bazaar, thanks to tonight's spare oil. A week after Thebes' oil IPO, Ipu took a trip upstream to Esna's temple to measure stone faces for a new project. Before entering the statue crypt, he stopped by the northern corridor where artisans had just dismantled scaffolding, revealing a fresh relief. Ra, crowned with a fiery solar disk, thrusting a trident through the writhing serpent Apep. The heroic scene was familiar from children's scrolls to commemorative steles, but what caught Ipu's eye was a corner at Ra's shin height, 3 small figures in brown loincloths, holding clay lamps, aloft like a flare squad. At first, he thought they were decorative guardians of the composition. Closer inspection revealed the artisan had carved soot stains on the lamp's rims, even capturing the hesitant hand gestures of those fearing to spill oil on a god's feet. A tiny detail testing the limits of eyesight, but clearly sufficient to stir Ipu. These were the rare background actors who made it into the main story, where pharaohs, priests, and gods always hogged the frame. Just then, cautious footsteps echoed behind. The temple overseer, his braided beard tied with linen cord, cleared his throat and explained, "Royal decree, to honor commoners who tended lamps during the eclipse. This is a test carving. If it doesn't fade, we'll replicate it on 2 more slabs." He raised a torch closer, its light making the 3 lamp holders' shadows flicker, as if stepping out of stone. Ipu nodded, heart quickening as he recalled Saba, Keto, Mert the tiny army, that, for 3 nights, twisted wicks and poured oil to ensure dawn was etched again on Karnak's ceiling. He asked softly, "Are their names carved?" The overseer shook his head slightly. "Not possible, the main relief must balance, but at least their shadows are hardened in stone." The reply floated lightly, but left a weight in Ipu's chest. Heavy as a stone pillar, history loved to name kings, but small lights truly saved the day. That day, Ipu finished measuring early but lingered in Esna until dusk to watch the sun sink behind the columns. As the last rays painted Ra's halo red, the lamp-holding commoners drowned in purple shadow, a wry reminder, small lamps, you need sharp eyes to see. Ipu suddenly recalled the market bustle, oil prices spiking, profiteers thriving, others pinching shells, yet this stone spared barely a handspan for them. Would anyone tomorrow remember Tutu's 40 jars or farmers mixing goat fat to light lamps? Walking the river dock back, he met night shift stone haulers. They grinned, asking about new oil prices, then swapped tomb, guarding tales. One gatekeeper said, "I stayed up, earned 3 shell coins. No name on the stele." The quip, short as a pebble tossed in water, rippled far. Ipu thought, how often do we forget to thank night shift guards? Grand epics skipped the rests-off wick, changers, maids with midnight bread, doctors tending wounds at twilight. With that, he asked the overseer for a broken tile and charcoal. Before leaving Esna, Ipu sketched 3 lamp-holding figures on the shard, adding neat text, "Small wicks keep dawn." He wrapped it, intending it for Pippi a reminder that you don't need center stage to matter. Sometimes, the audience raising phones to light an exit path is the real hero. Back in Thebes that night, his family set out barley cakes and a simple lamp. Pippi took the tile, studying the faint charcoal lines, and asked, "Why not draw Ra?" Ipu ruffled his hair. "Ra's bright enough, needs no sketching, but wicks are frail. Someone's got to draw their keepers." Mert, beside them, added, "Like praising the one sweeping the last trash, not just shining in graduation photos." If Beckett were there, she'd nod. Her mirror's beam carried no name in decrees, living only in the memories of those lulled by its flash. After dinner, river breezes swept through the slatted door, tilting the lamp's shadow. Pippi flipped the tile repeatedly, making the lamp holders flicker like a cartoon. His small arm cheered softly. "They're running around the temple." The whimsy made Mert laugh brightly. The sound spread, kindling warmth without oil. Tiny lights indeed were still at work. Before bed, Ipu checked the lamp, pouring the last oil drops. Watching the wick soak, he thought of guards, oil pourers, night shift doctors, and the castor tears of those squeezing bottle dregs against APEP. He vowed, tomorrow, back at the workshop, he'd etch a tiny mark on the new project's stone just visible to keen eyes, a clay lamp with minuscule text, "For the nameless shifts." A faint scar under the pharaoh's grand statue, but at least someone brushing it would know a lone flame once blazed in the long night. The storyteller pauses here, whispering a question. When did you last nod thanks to the apartment guard, night nurse, or 2 a.m. delivery driver? Try closing your device, drifting to the last memory of a lone lamp, easing your mind a hallway hospital light, an emergency bulb in a parking garage, or a coder's keyboard glow patching an app update smoothly. Breathe deep, picture that light carved in your life's relief, to tell someone tomorrow, "Without them, my sun wouldn't rise on time." 300 years after Ipu scratched, small wicks keep dawn onto a tile, Egypt's empire had borrowed new hues, Greco-Roman. Alexandria's port was like a Mediterranean Times Square. Signs in Greek overlaid hieroglyphs, commerce chattered in at least 4 tongues, chief among them the language of prices. Amid this international feast, a tiny souvenir surged like an ancient TikTok trend, the eclipse watching charm, a bronze pendant with Ra, wings spread, holding a solar disk in his right hand, and a clay oil lamp in his left. The idea came from Egyptian-born merchants. They noticed Greek tourists loved small charms for necklaces warding off evil while looking cool. So, they shrank an entire cosmology into a palm-sized trinket. Ra, the trusted sun guarantee brand, now wielded a Theban backup battery. The tiny lamp, etched with a wick and faint smoke wisps, gave buyers a feeling, wear this, and if an eclipse hits, turn your back on Fira and company. We'll flip on the flash. Within 2 harvest seasons, oil lamp charms flooded Mediterranean markets, carried by camel caravans racing across the Sahara to Syria and Anatolia. Greeks dubbed them lampadophylax, lamp guardian. In Antioch's market, 3 taps on a wooden stall summoned a vendor, pulling handfuls of gleaming bronze pendants from a leather pouch, Ra, lamp in hand. Smirking, for extra meme value. Instant appeal, cheap, durable, dodging Rome's luxury tax. Bonus perk. Marketed as a miniature of Esna's relief-making Bacchus, drinking collectors swoon. Egyptian faith, thus, exported with lighting know-how. In Syria, local lamp makers, intrigued, held a full-moon lamp hack fest, hanging scores of bronze lenses to reflect on city walls. They called it Ra's Disco Ball, torch-lit, spinning mirrored pillars rumored to birth Eid al-Lampas, the lamp-lighting festival, though later religious texts stayed mum. From Syria, camel after camel hauled charms up Anatolia's slopes. Cappadocia's windy, dusty passes and icy winter nights saw each caravanserai hang a Thebes-style clay lamp replica. Travelers whispered, "Small charm, big wind-no-shadow clings to your back with this lamp." The placebo that lulled Ipu and Saba now swept mushroom-shaped rock valleys. Textile vendors began weaving Ra with lamp into scarf hems, paired with a loose translation, small light, long road, less worry. But hot products breed drama. Roman merchants in Ephesus spotted fake charms overmixed with tin feather light, prone to scratches, yet priced pure Ra. A dispute flared. Who owned the oil lamp image rights? Alexandria's faction sent legal scrolls to their courts for protection. Ephesus claimed cultural exchange. The outcome? Rome's Senate passed Lux Lucet 12b, allowing Ra lamp charm production but mandating a made under Roman law stamp and Silk Road trade tax. Sound familiar? Yes, it's the 2025 tech world's phone copy wars, fighting over every icon, every charging port. While Rome bickered, caravans trudged on, lugging charms across the Taklamakan Desert, through the Hexi corridor to Chang'an's end. The Han dynasty transliterated Ra to lap, sounding rustic like straw, but capital scholars adored the lamp detail. They grafted it onto jade pendants, swapping the solar disk for a he-she seal. Ra's image faded, the lamp endured, shadows migrated, so did fears, but light remained the universal cure. Back in Thebes, Tutu roared with laughter at a Syrian trader's letter proposing a lamp anti-fear franchise. He barely knew where Syria was, but profit margins screamed approval. That night, he hosted Ipu, Beckett, and Mena for date beer, bragging, "Flare chains now flare silk light as long as the silk road." Mena rubbed his hands, eyeing taxes. Beckett pinched Tutu's ear. "Don't forget the roots this lamp started with Nubian kids' sweaty wicks." Ipu backed her. "Each charm batch. Save one jar for the night shift fund." That tacit deal etched the first trade contract with a social clause. See, the faith startup kept pivoting, raising capital, going global IPO. From one APEP scare night, Egyptians turned oil lamps into a spiritual vaccine, then packaged it for export. 2,000 years later, you check an eclipse tracker app circle, buy a sun pendant in an Athens gift shop, unwittingly reaping that ancient marketing campaign. Now, before closing your eyes, picture camels plodding over dunes, sacks of oil lamp charms jangling with the wind. That breeze carries a gentle nudge. Every shadow needs a spark to travel with. So, flick your bedside switch. Let its tiny glow be your lampadophylax. It may not carve Ra, but the LED's blue hum continues the legend, banishing APEP's ghosts, lurking in late emails, push notifications, looming deadlines. Breathe deep, set airplane mode, and let your 2025 mini lamp guard you, like those charms guided caravans to the Silk Road's end. Sleep soft as desert sand under camel hooves, warm as castor oil soaking a wick, and twinkling like Beckett's first beam shot skyward. Wake tomorrow to news of candle price spikes from a blizzard, and smile. You know, light stock has paid dividends for 25 centuries, and that, strangely, makes any shadow less daunting. Nowadays, when a total solar eclipse arrives, people scramble for ISO-certified glasses, sync their watches, and stream NASA's live feed. The silver corona flashes for under 4 minutes, and global audiences clap, "Wow." That shimmering moment feels as light as a social media filter, but rewind the reel 3,000 years, and it was a death knell. All of Egypt trembled, burning through castor oil reserves to sustain a fragile spark. Ancient eclipses weren't scientific spectacles, but sky-swallowing monsters. As the shadow crept over the sun's disk, pyramids, docks, and Thebes' cliffs became stages for fear. Nubian slaves tended fires all night. Priestess Beckett angled bronze mirrors to signal. Pharaoh Amenhotep rallied 500 lamps for a decoy sun. Merchant Tutu doubled oil prices, and camel caravans from Alexandria spread Ra's lamp-holding charms along the Silk Road. Every class clung to a burning wick to reassure themselves dawn would return. Looking back, that fingertip-sized spark was the most enduring character in humanity's resilient saga. Without it, Nubian children wouldn't have braved wick changes, Beckett wouldn't have fired her beam, Amenhotep couldn't stage his false sun, and Tutu would have had no flare coin to pitch. The tiny wick was both a psychological battery and a pause button for each era's panicked pulse. That legacy persisted as Egyptian culture blended with Greco-Roman. In Alexandria, Myth was miniaturized into bronze pendants. Ra, one hand on his solar disk, the other gripping a clay lamp. These eclipse watching charms became the port's hottest souvenir, then rode camels across the Sahara, through Syria, around Anatolia, to the Hexi corridor. At each stop, lamp-lighting rituals morphed locally, but the core stayed. However far shadows roamed, fear followed, and the castor wick remained a universal sedative. We think we're different, armed with orbital math and specialized glasses, but deep down, the fear mechanism endures. Instead of APEP, we dread dead emails, looming deadlines. Instead of castor, we plug in amber-lead bedside lamps. When the brightness sensor flicks on, our brains still whisper, "Ra's back." That's the 2025 version of the castor wick. So, next time you set down your ISO glasses and post an HDR Corona shot, pause a breath to recall the chain of nameless flame keepers. Their names didn't make reliefs, but their small lights saved dynasties. From the oil-slicked hands of lamp slaves, through Bakate's mirror beam, to Tutu's commercial ambition, history slow plays a long reel of resilience. No shadow, however vast, withstands the collective pinpricks of light. If insomnia traps your eyes tonight, conjure the scent of resin tinged with scorched honey, blue-gray smoke curling around stone columns, the wicks crackle like popping corn. Picture yourself in Karnak's courtyard, mountain breezes hissing, lamps casting shadows, your mind tallying each oil drop left. Then ask, am I really afraid of darkness, or just the gap of unfilled knowledge? Like ancient Egyptians, naming the fear orbits, interest rates, or a blinking low battery icon cuts its power in half. After a 3,000-year journey, and over 3,000 words of chronicle, the endpoint remains the sun's return. Ra never lingers more than a few minutes late, and that smoky wick holds just long enough. So, instead of chasing worries on your screen, hit the off button. Let your bedside lamp fuel the tale. Tomorrow, when light slips through curtains, don't forget to nod thanks. A glance to the apartment's night guard, a word for the late-night app, update crew, or at least a smile to yourself for keeping that tiny LED lit through the dark. Sleep well, with the imagined hum of castor wicks, and wake knowing your spark joins a 25th-century saga of light outshining shadows. See, for 3,000 years, a spark as small as a wick's tip has carried humanity through every kind of shadow, from APEP sky, swallowing serpent to 4G-era anxieties. The lesson fits neatly in a lamp's cradle. Keep a small but steady light. It might be knowledge, kindness, or a thank you to a night shift worker. As long as that glow endures, dawn will always find its way back. If you're watching from New York, Houston, or anywhere on the US, map, don't just watch and move on. Hit like if this story eased your mind about the unknown void. Subscribe to catch the next historical journey. And especially, comment to share how you keep your wick's flame burning, maybe a book on your nightstand, a late-night email cheering a coworker, or simply your blinking bedside lamp. Share this video with history-loving friends to keep fueling this storytelling flame. Thanks for joining the journey, and here's to a peaceful night full of light.